Interviewer Mr. Elmer Milton Fisher, Rochester Armory, Culver Road, 24 April 2001. The interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Robert von Hassel, and videographer is Mr. Wayne Clark. Mr. Fisher, tell me, where were you born and raised?
Born in Chicago, Illinois. However, I was raised in Rochester, New York.
And when were you born in Chicago?
22nd of December, 1924.
How did you come to Rochester?
My father found a job in Rochester.
Doing what?
Right, and with the clothing industry.
Tell me a little bit about your family.
Just my wife and myself.
Your parents?
My parents were both deceased. They're both Rochesterians.
Okay. And did you have brothers and sisters when you were growing up?
Yes, I have two sisters. One at the present time lives in Santee, California, is outside of San Diego, and the other one's a resident of Las Vegas.
So what was it like growing up in Rochester in those days?
Yeah. It was very good. I went to public school at 24 up on Meg Street near Highland Park, and which was converted to an apartment house, roughly 35 years ago.
And what did you want to be when you grew up?
Undecided until I decided to go to RIT back in 1942, and at that point the war began, and I was drafted in the Navy.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's back up for a moment here. Do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor was attacked, when you first heard about it?
Yes, I do. I was sitting on my girlfriend's front porch. Oh my God.
And what seemed to be the general reaction? I mean...
well, I knew that even I was 17 at the time, and conversely, I knew that it was very serious. The United States was at war, and even though we had to quick get out a map and see exactly where Pearl Harbor was.
Now, what was Rochester like in the early war years? Now, you weren't in the Navy yet. When did you enter the Navy?
1943.
43?
Yes.
So, almost all of 42 you were in Rochester?
That's right.
What differences did the war bring to Rochester?
Basically, everyone was either working in a defense factory, or you were going to school. Mm-hmm. And conversely, all of your friends were going into the service either by the draft or they were enlisting, and so at that point,
what kind of defense factories were around here?
We had Eastman Kodak, Bausch and Lomb, and then down at Lake Ontario, we had the facilities there for making ships and for making freighters. Mm-hmm. And they weren't built complete there. They were put together, and then they were floated out of Lake Ontario down to St. Lawrence and onto the coast for completion. And that was at the Odenbach shipbuilding plant, mm-hmm. which is still there in existence today, not as a shipbuilding plant. It's probably, I think it's vacant by now.
Was there a pronounced difference in the community? I mean, what about rationing? Or?
Yes, it affected everyone.
How so?
Yeah.
I mean, what was it like?
Well, being as I didn't do the grocery shopping, I really don't, that wasn't my responsibility. As far as gasoline, you have coupons for your gasoline. And even though there was a lot of gasoline around, and occasionally when we were kids then at that time, and we would buy gasoline over on Mount Hope Avenue, and it was black market gasoline at a ridiculous price of 25 cents a gallon. Mm. Yes.
And what kind of difference did it make for you as a young boy, 17, 18 years old?
Well, basically, as I said, I was in my first year as a student at RIT, and at that time, and after the first year, I went in the Navy.
Do you remember anything about civil defense? Were people concerned about that?
No, we did have a contingent of the Air Force that stayed at the Hotel Seneca in downtown Rochester, and there, and among these, down there, they were, some of them were inspectors, became government inspectors at the various defense plant, Kodak, Bausch and Lomb, and so on.
Now, you were in RIT. What were you studying?
Photography.
Okay. And then you got your draft notice?
Yes.
Okay, when was that?
Let me look. Okay, let's see here. I went into service on the 19th of June, 1943. So it was a couple of months before that.
Okay. Let's hold for a second. Now we're talking about you were drafted and you entered the service in June of 43.
Right.
What happened then?
Oh, I went to the Sampson Naval Training Station. And from there, I went through boot camp there and service school. And due to the fact that the mechanical aptitude, they decided I ought to be a gunner's mate.
Okay.
So we went to gunner's mate school down there. And then after that, eventually I was assigned a ship down in New York City.
And what ship was that?
The ship was the Ulvert M. Moore. It was a destroyer escort, DE-442. It was named after Henson Barr, who sacrificed himself along with the other pilots of the ill-fated Torpedo Squadron 8 on the 4th of June, 1942.
It was in Midway, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Our ship was commissioned in Brooklyn, New York, 18th of July, 1944. We sailed through the Panama Canal on the 13th of October to participate in the last 3 invasions of the Pacific.
Which 3 were those?
The invasion of the Luzon in the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa.
Okay. Now, what was your job aboard the Moore?
I was gun captain of the forward 2 20-millimeter anti-aircraft guns.
And what did that involve?
Oh, it had involved just wearing the earphones and the responsibility of both guns firing and being loaded when they should be, and under air attack or under general quarters, and also the maintenance of the guns when you're not at general quarters.
Now, had you ever been to sea before?
No.
How was that?
Great. Yeah. It was a rough trip. But it was great. I was never seasick.
But destroyer escorts were very small, very cramped.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
How many men were living with you on a destroyer?
A little over 200. Yeah.
And how did you manage to put up with all those people living so close?
Oh, actually, when you're on watch 4 hours on, 8 hours off, it isn't too bad. You're separated. And then when you're not on watch, you're on work details. You're taking care of your guns. And that's not necessarily the guns that you're at general quarters with. Other times, I was also in charge of maintenance of the forward 40, twin 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. And also I knew the 5-inch 38. So that way, conversely, weather permitting, you didn't sleep down below decks anyways. You grabbed your blanket, you grabbed your stuff, your mattress, and went up to the top side, where the air was much cooler, because it was rather hot down there.
Did you ever worry about rolling off the ship while you were asleep?
No.
And what were your shipmates like?
Oh, they're a good bunch. Yeah, they're from all over the United States, and oh, good God, we must have had 25, 30 different at one time. 25, 30 different states represented aboard ship, and most of them basically from the east or from the southeast.
Did you have any problems getting along with people from other backgrounds, other states?
No.
Why was that?
Fine?
Why was that? I mean, all thrown together there with
Oh, yeah,
coming from a small town upstate New York.
yeah. Well, you gotta look at it this way, a lot of those kids at that time were from a lot smaller than towns in Rochester.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what was your captain like?
Oh, well, it's like this. The destroyer escort sailors always took great pride in their ships. Ours, maybe more so, is we felt that we were a little bit special, as our skipper was a president's son, Franklin Roosevelt Jr. He was awarded the Silver Cross in the invasion of Italy. He was a great skipper who excelled in all aspects of command. Our division officers were all very capable. Health permitting, they attend our reunions every other year. Engineering officer was Lieutenant Cuccinello, who was mentioned throughout the book South from Corregidor by John H. Merrill. He referred to him as one of the bravest men he ever knew. It was a list of men at that time.
Tell me about what was
Roosevelt?
Roosevelt. Yeah, I imagine he was a commander.
Yes, he was lieutenant commander at that time.
Lieutenant commander?
Yes.
Tell me more about what was he like? I mean, what kind of relationship did you have with him, or did you see him often? I mean,
Oh, yeah. He's a great communicator, just like his father.
did he sound like his father?
Yes. Yeah, he was a very capable officer.
Do you ever get the feeling the Navy was treating him and your ship differently because he was the captain?
No. Fact of the matter is, he had orders down to the radio shack. If anything should be, anything that could interest him, ever come over, even when he's asleep, he wanted to be awake, because he wanted to volunteer for it. Yes. Yeah. He did have a pick. He picked his own executive officer. That was the only one that I know of. And he was a Whitney from, they went to Harvard together. And he was also a very fine officer. He was very cool, Whitney.
Well, Commander Roosevelt, what stands out in your mind the most about him? Why did you think he was a good officer?
He had the ability to give commands, and then always brought the ship around to the most advantageous position when we were being attacked by kamikazes. He was a good seaman. Yeah.
And you remember any particular incidents about him?
Well, let's see. Well, tell you one funny one. I was rather proficient with a 20 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. My job was to explode the floating mines, and so conversely, there was one time we went into port, and the fire controlman overhauled the gun sight, and conversely, at that point, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with it. And he was standing up on the bridge. I'll never forget. He says, "Fisher," he says, "you're making a damn fool out of me today." But I thought it was funny.
And how did that make you feel?
Not too good, no. There's nothing I could do about it. Yeah.
Were you? Was he still on board the day his father died?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
were you were on board at the same time?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. All right, so that was that. Let's see, I got it written up here. Okay. I was on watch. On the 13th of April, actually, it was back in the States, it was still the 12th. And the Pacific became extremely calm. It was like the top of a billiard table. I never saw it like that before. I never saw it like that afterwards. That's when we received the news that the President Roosevelt's death. And then, of course, then he stayed aboard ship naturally, and the war was over, and then he got transferred back to the Naval War College, and became a commander.
He didn't fly home for his father's funeral?
No, no.
Well, how did you all feel about him, you know, and when his father died? I mean, did you go up and talk to him about it?
We expressed our condolences, yes, yeah. I got allergies, yeah, very bad. They took a pill just before I left. Okay, yes, and he was, as I remember it, he took it pretty good, naturally, but it was outward appearances. But, actually, he was felt very bad for the death of his father, yeah.
And what about the rest of the crew? How did they feel?
Oh, they felt, well, everybody liked him as a skipper. And thought he was great. Felt very bad for him.
Yeah, it must have been a rather painful day. I mean,
Yes.
watching your captain
Yeah.
suffer his
Yes.
father's death, and the
That's
father
right.
also being the president of the United
Yes.
States.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the only president you ever remembered.
No.
You could remember Hoover?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I remember when Roosevelt was elected.
Yeah, you mentioned the kamikazes before.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, basically, we had it was 5th of January, 1945, and we're on our way to the invasion of the Luzon in the Philippines. We were going through the San Bernardino Strait. We were delivering mail to other ships that we had picked up the mail in Pelu. And we had just cast off our lines from the Minneapolis when the carrier Amity Bay was hit by a kamikaze. The kamikaze, what it did was they were landing planes on the Amity Bay, and the kamikaze sneaked into just behind the last plane that was in line up there waiting to be brought down. And when it was over the aircraft carrier, the kamikaze came right straight down. And exploded on the deck, and a bomb went through the flight deck and exploded down below. And we picked up 4 men, and unfortunately one of them died. The ship became a burning hulk, and one of the destroyers sank it with a torpedo as it was getting dark. Just before sunset, we were on the outer edge of the fleet when 6 kamikazes came in at bearing 270 degrees, and they were about 35, 50 feet off the water. We shot down one. And the D. Stafford got another, but unfortunately the Stafford was hit by a third at the water line. She was taking on water at an alarming rate. We sped to her aid, taking off 54 men and 3 officers. The Halligan DD 584 took off additional men. The Moore and the Halligan stood by, and eventually the fleet tug Copa arrived and passed a tow line. On the 6th of January, the Moore splashed a Vale bomber, and on the 7th of January, we got another kamikaze. Several months later, the Halligan hit a floating mine, and was sunk.
Well, now tell me, what did it feel like when you were on your 20-millimeter mount and you were being attacked by a kamikaze?
Well, it had when you see them coming in, especially when they came in, there were 3 abreast and 2 deep, made 6. And in a 5-inch 38, they opened up roughly at around 4,000 yards. Mm-hmm. And then your twin 40s, they take over around 3,000 yards. And then when you get to 400 yards, that's when the 20s open up. And it's because they're not good beyond that. Mm-hmm. And yes, you don't do a lot of thinking. I mean, you're very truthful. And
well, 400 yards, that's pretty close. That plane's bearing right in on your ship.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, well, in those days, they were going pretty slow.
But you must be,
Yeah.
you must be feeling something, thinking something. I mean,
Yeah, you're kind of scared. Yeah,
thinking about
Yeah.
what might happen if you don't knock
Yeah.
that ship down.
yeah. That's about it. You know. And it's and then you watch them split, and you watch some of them splash into the water, and you watch them split, and they go this way and that way, trying to get the different ships.
Do you ever work in the 20 millimeter mount and wonder, you know, as a plane's bearing down on your ship, at what point do you stop firing and bail over the side or out of the gun tub, or
No, there's no place to go. Yeah,
too small a ship?
yeah. Where are you going to go? Yeah,
So basically just keep firing
yeah,
till,
yeah. Yes, yes.
till the guy
Yeah.
splashes.
Yeah. When one, I think if I remember right, there was 90 20 millimeter rounds in a magazine. You know, when that's exhausted, you have the second loader would hand me. I'd rip that one off, and the second loader would hand the new one to me, and I put it on it in place, and it could continue firing.
Must have been an incredible experience. I mean, the noise.
Especially when they're coming in at 270 degrees, because you've got the twin 40 millimeters firing right over your head. You know, yes, that makes a considerable amount of noise.
What did you think about the kamikaze pilots? I mean,
Ah,
it must have been a very bizarre thing to you.
yes, yeah. Well, we thought they were a little crazy. That's about it.
It said something about the Japanese, though, that they were that
Well,
committed.
Let's put it that way. The Japanese, they died for their emperor. And, the Japanese used to look upon the United States forces as, you people die for souvenirs. So,
What about the kamikazes came in waves?
usually, yes.
Before the attacks, it must have been pretty tense.
You never saw them. They used to, well, in that particular case, going through the San Bernardino Straits, they used to hop over the island, over the hills, and that's why the radar never picked them up. And in those particular cases,
What did it feel like after you'd beaten off an attack? I mean, what were you feeling when it was all over?
elated, yes. Very
Because
much.
you were alive, or
Yes, yeah.
you know, you're all of what, 19, 20 at this point?
Yeah, I was 19, yeah,
And you're involved in a life and death struggle.
yeah.
Did you ever stop and say, this is incredible, or what am I doing here? Or,
No, no.
anything else particularly you remember from the invasions?
Nothing much. At the, actually, Iwo Jima, and then we had an easy time. There was ships attacked around us, but we were never attacked. Let's see what we got here. And Roosevelt, after he got transferred, after the war was over, he got transferred back to the States, and we got another captain. And things along miscellaneous. December 25th, 1944, Captain Roosevelt led the ship in prayers. He did a fine job. Food was great. Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt sent Christmas trimmings for the mess hall. 10th of January, 1945, we were in a typhoon. We rolled over 65 degrees on several times. At that point, the screws were out of the water, and the ship vibrates very badly. Well, that's being scared.
Yeah, tell us about
Yeah.
the typhoon.
Yeah, unbelievable. When you start, when it's easier to walk up the bulkhead than it is the deck, and it's very, very terrifying at that point. That scares the hell out of you. Air attacks are one thing, because they're fast, they're over with, you don't have time to think about them. The typhoon, you got hours and hours and hours. And, when you have the, let's say, of white water coming over the bridge, and they were a rough, they were a good ship, the DEs, but they didn't ride like a battleship, that's for sure.
Yeah, you must have been thrown around like a cork.
Oh yeah, yeah, we were. But we were extremely fortunate. We at least we survived. That was more than the Monahan, the Spence, and one other. A few months before that, another Typhoon. They went down.
Mm-hmm. How did you personally ride out the Typhoon? What were you doing at the time?
Well, at the worst of it, all watches were secured, and you go below decks.
And what did you do below decks?
Hang on. Yeah, that was about it.
Did you finally get seasick at that point?
No. Well, there was nothing to get seasick on because there wasn't any food served. Yeah, that's about it. Eventually, you could get some sandwiches, that type of thing.
The 65 degrees list, though, it's like the floor practically is on its way to becoming the wall.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You go momentarily. You go walk up the bulkhead. Yeah. And the deck became the wall.
So at those points, you must have wondered,
if you're going to get that, if it's going to come back again. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So you'd say the Typhoons were worse than the air attacks?
They lasted longer.
How did you feel when the Typhoon was over?
Oh, great. Yeah. Marvelous. Yeah. You start putting the ship back together again.
Walk up on deck and see the skies clearing?
Yeah, right.
Realize you're going to be alive?
Yeah, yes. And there's always a lot of damage done on those Typhoons, throwing everything around.
Now, I noticed in your file something about an attack on a Japanese submarine.
Yes. Okay. That was going through the another time there, and I got it written up here somewhere. And that's on the captain who replaced Roosevelt. Yeah. What do I do with it? I'll have to wing it. There was a sub was spotted on the surface, and there was 3 of us that took off after it. I think there was another DE and a can, and we got our first sounding on it, and after a couple of hours, and we fired our forward Hedgehogs, and the Hedgehog was a rocket, 7.2 inches in diameter, and if I remember right, you put out about 26 of them at a time, and it laid out a pattern on the water. You could either fire out the pattern either to the port side or to the starboard. In our cases, we always fired them out to the port, and they made a pass at the sub. And conversely, it was we had a hit down there, and all told, we continued on making passes on the sub, and scoring usually a hit every time. And on the 6th pass over the sub blew up underneath us, and so that was and for that we received the Presidential Unit Citation from the Philippine government due to the fact that there was 2 Japanese generals aboard who were trying to get back to Japan, and so that was it was a feather in our hat. Yes, I was proud to see that submarine painted on the bridge. Yeah.
Now, how did you know that it had blown up beneath you? Did you hear about that afterwards?
No.
Or you could tell?
Yeah. It more or less lifted the fantail of the ship up when it blew. And even though it was getting dark, there was some debris coming up. Because we had heard other explosions before that, minor ones, but that was a big one. The advantage of the Hedgehog over the depth charge was that the sonar men never lost contact and by having the water riled up as you do with the explosions from the depth charges.
Now, how long did your attack on the submarine last?
Hour and a half?
Were you ever concerned that the sub might turn and try to torpedo you?
No, no.
You were that tight on the submarine.
Yes, yes.
Anything else you remember about the attack?
No, that was about it, yeah.
You felt pretty good about having taken out a Japanese submarine, huh? That was pretty unusual for a destroyer escort.
Yes, yeah.
Now, anything else you remember about, or that stands out in your mind about your service in the Pacific?
No, I think that's about it.
What are these notes that you're reading from?
Well, I kind of put it all in chronological order. Oh, incidentally, you asked about Franklin. Yeah, okay. He was instrumental in our first reunion in Washington, D.C., 1962. He gave us a VIP conducted tour of the White House, as well as a cocktail party at the Hotel Washington, which was our reunion headquarters. He held a flunky job during the Kennedy administration. I think it was Assistant Secretary of Commerce or something. And his ambition was to be Secretary of Navy. And but unfortunately, he was disliked by Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense. And so that was that. I've often thought that Franklin would have been a better Secretary of Navy than McNamara was Secretary of Defense. But, yeah.
Now, do you still go to reunions?
Yeah, every other year. Once in a great while, I miss one. But,
And they rotate around the country?
Yes. Yeah.
And where is it going to be next year?
This will be in Albany. This coming year will be in Albany. Yeah.
How come? Why Albany?
Oh, well, mainly because Alan Gard, our assistant gunnery officer, and volunteered to have it. Yes, it's quite an undertaking. Yeah.
And while you're there, you're going to go aboard the USS Slater?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
Have you ever been aboard her before?
No. It's a slightly different ship than the one we were on. Yeah.
I understand it's one of only, I think, 2 surviving DEs.
Yes.
So that must be something you're looking forward to. I mean, to be able to actually step, slightly different class,
Yeah.
but step on the deck of a DE. And how many years has it been now since you last stepped off?
Yeah. How about 1945? Yeah, a couple of years. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think it'll bring back a lot of memories?
Probably. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And that's going to be when, in September?
Yes. I'll give you the dates.
I'm going to call down to the boat and get them.
Yeah.
All right, so briefly, bring us up to date. After, when did you come back to the States?
Oh, came back to the States in 1945, and we started. I came back on another ship, actually. What happened there was at that point, gunner's mates and torpedo men were SX baggage, and so they said they could reduce the ship's complement by 10. And so there was 6 of us who decided to get off at that point. We went to the Philippines at that point to Cavite, and we stayed there for a couple of weeks. Then we got a ship back to the States, and the ship was an old freighter, and it had been sunk, torpedoed in an earlier invasion of the Pacific, and had been beached, patched up, and we came back from Cavite to San Francisco at 10 knots, and it took us 30 days. Yes.
And once you were back in San Francisco, you were just out processed?
No. I didn't have enough points to get out at that point. And so conversely, we got our leave papers. And actually, the facilities for getting out of San Francisco at that time were very, very crowded. And so you had to wait 5-6 days in order to get a train out. So eventually we decided that we'd try thumbing. And so we thumbed, and we got as far. We went through Reno, thumbed up through Reno, Nevada, and we got 100 miles east of the Reno, and we caught a train, and we managed to get on it. It was a train that came out of Frisco, out of San Francisco there. Managed to get on it, went home on leave, reported to probably Pier 92, I think it was, in New York City, if I remember right. And after that, and then it was a few months, and managed to get a discharge. Get a discharge from Sampson, New York, where I started out, only 3 years before.
So what was it like when you first came back to Rochester and your parents got to see you after you'd been away for a few years?
Oh, it was great, yeah. Reunions are happy, yes.
Did you seem different to them, or
Not too much, no.
were they kind of surprised by the way you looked?
Yeah, I still had a dark tan in the wintertime, you know. Yeah, that was about it, yeah.
What did you do after the war?
I went back to RIT.
Still photography?
Yes. Got out of RIT in '48, and I wandered around the country a while. Worked out in Ohio, up in Detroit, and then came back to Rochester, and eventually got a job photographer at Eastman Kodak Company. I stayed there and retired on May the 1st of 1986.
What have you been doing since?
Playing golf, yes. And we still we used to have a home in Pittsford, and I take care of my own, take care of the lawn and things of that nature.
Did you ever get married?
Yes, I was married in 1948, and still married today. Same wife.
Children?
No children, unfortunately.
When you look back after all these years, what stands out the most in your mind from your time in the Navy?
I think that it was the togetherness of the crew. We were a very tightly knit group, and still are.
Did your time in the Navy change your life?
Oh, I don't know if it did or not, but probably did.
In what way? Did it change your outlook on things, or?
To a certain extent, because you're still pretty young then. Yeah.
What about the GI Bill? Did you?
Yeah, that's no, RIT. Made use of it. Yes.
Well, we're going to come down to the last couple of minutes on the
Okay.
tape here, so I'm going to give you an opportunity for any last thoughts you had.
Oh.
Anything?
Okay. No, I think that the here we can time to show you kick this. Some of the stuff is humorous. The captain who replaced Roosevelt was entirely different.
How so?
Well, as a seaman, he probably didn't have the ability to command a motor whaleboat, let alone a destroyer escort. Every time we refueled at sea, or took provisions over the side, was always our port to their starboard, and conversely, he didn't have the ability to hold the same course as the larger ship. So you would either be going in towards the other ship or going away from it. And if you were refueling, then the fuel lines would come to the point of breaking, stretched out, or they'd be dangling in the sea. And then you'd have to order a hard right rudder and to reverse the situation. And of course, it was one day we were getting fuel from an aircraft carrier, and conversely, he failed to order the hard full right rudder in time, and we crashed into the carrier. And it made the captain of the carrier was rather angry, shall we say, putting it mildly. Another time was when we he set a direct course to a floating mine, and I was up on a 40 millimeter general quarters at that point, and I couldn't see the mine, and I didn't see it because I never wasn't looking that close. somebody pointed it out and said, "Oh my God, there it is." And we were still heading right straight at it. And that's when the chief quartermaster took over command of the ship and ordered both engines reverse, emergency reverse, and everyone to the fantail. And we came within about 3.5 foot of the mine before we backed away. And that was then that we decided, when the offer came, that we decided we'd get off while we could.
You got about 30 seconds.
Well, I think that's a good
Yeah.
point to end on. Good story.